Welcome to the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode number 119. Hi, I'm Chris. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Jill. Chris and I are your co-hosts and the founders of the Becoming Ellie community.
The Becoming Ellie community is for women over 50 who are interested in being fit, strong, and healthy.
We named our group Becoming Ellie because Ellie was the Norse goddess of aging who beat Thor in a wrestling match. Chris and I thought we should try to be more like Ellie.
You can find out more about the Becoming Ellie community and sign up for our newsletter at our website, becomingellie.com. And Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I. Okay, Jill, let's talk about today's episode. We're talking with Dina Griffin.
Yes, Dina is full of great dietary information for women over 50 and for endurance athletes. So let's go to the podcast. Dina Griffin, MS, RDN, CSSD, is the owner and founder of The Nutrition Mechanic, a nutrition coaching and resource company based out of Boulder, Colorado. As a sport and performance dietitian, Dina works with all levels of adult endurance athletes to optimize health, vitality, and performance. She blends science-based and evidence-informed strategies along with real-life considerations to devise personalized and sustainable nutrition plans.
Dina has a particular passion for working with women's health, peri and post-menopause, masters and ultra athletes, and supporting individuals who have a metabolic condition.
Dina is also the co-host of the Inside Sports Nutrition podcast, which covers a wide array of topics on all things related to real-life sports nutrition. She can be found at nutritionmechanic.com or on Instagram as @nutritionmechanic and Facebook @mechanicdina. There's always that having to change between Instagram and Facebook. Welcome, Dina. We're delighted to talk with you today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show and with you today.
Obviously, since our podcast is called Fit Strong Women Over 50, it's pretty much those are the folks who listen to us. Those are the ones that are working towards us. Can you talk with us about nutrition for peri and for postmenopausal women? You know, what advice you might give us for that?
Yes, that is wonderful to address. And I'm so glad that the audience you have is our 50 and over, because it's a much neglected audience. And we definitely have certain.
Yeah, that's why we started the podcast, because we had trouble finding anything about it.
Thank you. Yes. And so, I mean, I'm in that 50 and older group here. So I'm very excited to have folks like you providing information too. But nutritionally, we start to think more in the perimenopausal years, that those several years leading up to, our final menstrual period. Nutritionally, we start thinking more about where and how are you getting your protein. As you've addressed on many of your previous podcasts, the importance of protein, not only to preserve lean muscle tissue, but also to protect bone, work with the immune system, to work with the age-related, anabolic resistance factors that come into play as we age. And some of that is hard to separate from, is this, perimenopause, or is this aging, or is this overlap? And I would say there's this overlap, because certainly with hormonal flux and our estrogen levels starting to become more erratic, eventually flatline, that certainly affects our protein needs, such that we need more, not just overall in our day, but considering distribution of protein as well. So that always comes to the top of my list. Certainly then when we're moving into post-menopause, nothing changes in that regard. So I see our peri-menopause years as that opportunity to really get into the swing of things. And if we've never really given attention to nutrition, it's not too late to start, okay, let's focus on the protein. But then, there's things like fiber, really looking at variety of plant foods. If we've got some nutrigenetic information on an individual, we can tailor that a bit more to understand, you have some gene variants here in this pathway. We've got to get clever with certain kinds of foods to kick up gene expression. That's kind of getting into the weeds here. But all that to say, micronutrients are really important as we get into perimenopause and postmenopause years. So that's all your vitamins, minerals, your phytonutrients, things that we often overlook because this culture of ours is focused a lot on macronutrients. We think of bone health, heart health, brain. And so all of those things warrant attention to kinds of fats that we're consuming, amount of fat. Carbohydrates don't get ignored, but we do have to get more strategic with carbohydrates as we age. So depending on athletic ability or our exercise volume, what kind of exercise we're doing, we can manipulate kinds of carbohydrate and timing of carbohydrate. So you can see there, there's a lot we can do in all of these areas of nutrition.
So to complicate that, if you're also an endurance athlete,
right.
How does that play into the whole nutrition thing?
Yeah, because we want to make sure we're getting adequate fueling. And I think as we age, there's this notion, well, I shouldn't be eating as much because I'm getting older, or it doesn't matter.
And I think we actually hear that at times, don't we? That you don't need as much as you get older.
Yeah, which
maybe if you sit around a lot more.
Exactly. We still have to factor in. I mean, are we doing a 1 hour run a day and then sitting the rest of the day? Or what kind of, non-exercise activity is happening to consider what maybe your energy needs are and work with just day-to-day energy needs and then supporting the training sessions. But for our endurance athletes, certainly, and this applies to 50 and older, I mean, we still can, if we're looking to get stronger or faster or fitter, or at least maintain what we've got.
Right.
We still need to fuel those sessions, those exercise bouts appropriately. But we may look at timing a little differently, or we may look at amounts of carbohydrate and protein and those ratios a little differently. So that's where we get like N of 1. Tell me about you and what you're looking for. And then we get to fine tune that.
So you really work with people on their macros to kind of like fine tune how much protein they should eat. Like in general, how much protein should a woman over 50 eat in terms of grams, I guess that would be.
Yeah, I know a lot of the recommendations are based on grams of protein per either pound of body weight or pound or kilogram of body weight or kilogram of lean muscle mass. So if we know your lean muscle mass or your lean, what is your body fat percentage, and we can get real granular and figure out all the numbers. But I mean, the working range for, let's say, an endurance athlete, 50 and older, I put that daily amount of protein on the higher side. So maybe 1.8 grams per kilogram body weight, upwards of maybe 2.5 grams per kilogram body weight. So it certainly can be well over, 110, 120 grams of protein. And I know a lot of women start freaking out, like, that is way too much. I don't know how to do that.
I can't eat that much chicken.
Yeah. And I know you talked about this before on some of your other pods, like it doesn't have to be all chewing steak, right? We can get a variety of plant proteins to make that happen. But I don't have an exclusive focus on macros, but I definitely have to start somewhere, right? And so that is kind of part of the foundation, but then we get to layer in a lot of
Do you have a percent where you go about carbs and healthy fats, or it's all on an individual basis? I mean, do you have sort of a range where you just start?
Well, first, I don't care for the percentages because
Gotcha.
In brief, the reasoning is, I mean, if you were under fueling like 1,000 calories per day and I said, oh, aim for 30% protein, I'm not addressing one problem that you're only eating 1,000 calories. So
Right.
I like to look at the absolute, you know, grams. And oftentimes I do that work and then translate it to food. What does it look like for you? So you don't have to weigh and measure every single thing, you know.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Because if I said, Chris, you got to have 100 grams of protein and you have no idea what that means, maybe it's more helpful to say, can you have, you know, 2 handfuls right now, or some other visual that you relate to, or can you send me a picture and we'll work from there. But as far as fat goes, geez, I know the recommendations can be quite big, right? Or the range. Yeah, pretty broad. But I definitely want to give attention to fat intake. I mean, it might start, if I had to give numbers, it might start around, you know, 1 gram of fat per kilogram body weight. But if we're looking to manipulate body composition, you know, we need to consider that. If we've got heart health in mind, we need to look at kinds of fats.
Yeah.
So that's why you always hear from dietitians like, well, there's a lot more to the story than just telling you how much fat to eat.
Yeah. If you're thinking about vegetable oil versus an avocado versus Crisco, you know, they're all fats.
Exactly. Right.
I know it's hard. It's hard for us to ask you a question that pertains to everyone, all of our listeners, because everybody's in a different place with their body mass and body composition.
I was thinking about the whole fat thing recently because there's a restaurant near us that advertises that all of their frying is done in lard.
Oh, they advertise that.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Someone said, I don't want to go there because they fry everything in lard. And I said, well, there are plenty of people that think lard is better for you than what most restaurants use for frying. So I don't know that I would exclude them for that. But it's like, there's just so much, I mean, really, there's so much controversy over types of fat. And
yeah, I feel too, we get pigeonholed into one aspect, right? Or it's that reductionist thinking, like, well, I'm only looking at fat, or that's the only thing that, you know, and we're neglecting all of the interplay of food and the dynamics and the synergy and the food matrix, all this stuff, let alone, you know, I'm over 50 and what are my needs, you know, and so we can really get bogged down. I think that's the real unfortunate thing about the nutrition world right now is it's either black and white or it's missing one.
Yeah, it's not a teeter-totter.
Exactly.
There's so many moving parts with your hormones. And
I guess that's going to lead into my question is, do you recommend a particular way of eating for women? You know, keto, paleo, vegan, any of those things, all of those things?
I start stuttering here on this question. No, I'm just kidding. I don't prescribe or recommend one kind of pattern or diet, but I will say a style of eating, one that balances blood sugar, right? Especially as we, you know, get into perimenopause, post-menopause, our insulin sensitivity, you know, generally speaking, changes. So we really need to be paying attention to combinations of food, quality of food, timing of food. I like to consider what your food preferences are instead of force. You've got to do this style just because, you know, I think we look at the evidence and the research, which we don't have, you know, massive amounts on postmenopausal women, let alone the athletic female as we get into our other aging groups. But I would say, yeah, like what are we doing well with balancing blood sugar? Do we have a lot of variety of plant foods? I do not advocate, you know, outright that everyone must be vegan or any of that, or on the flip side, carnivore. So, I think it's a mixed diet, but I certainly will honor if someone wants to be more vegetarian, vegan, then we work with that and try and optimize with where you're at.
So like if one of your clients is vegan or vegetarian, do you give them specific advice on like eat the protein portion, the beans or what have you first, or how do you?
Oh yeah. Like the order of food.
Yeah.
I think that's where it's helpful to understand what are we looking to change or improve. Certainly there are so many aspects there, like how fast are you eating? How big is that meal? Or did you wait too long? And then, what's in the meal, the quality of those foods, the composition. I will say generally I vote for putting that protein, first, but I'm not militant, like you have to eat all of the protein first, then move on to the starch. It certainly can help with those who are experiencing, blood sugar issues and we're experimenting, then we can look at the order of foods. But I would say quality or type of food might be higher on my list first, and then we can get to the order in which we're eating those foods.
You mentioned fiber earlier as an important thing for women, and fiber obviously comes from plants. How important is fiber, and what advice would you give if you just start working with someone? What kind of advice do you give people about that?
Yeah, we can start honestly with just doing a higher overview, like tell me, Jill, the last 2-3 days, if you jotted it down, no judgment, just tell me what your usual is or what are your usual meal combinations. And then simply look, okay, where are the vegetables? Where are the fruits? Do we have nuts and seeds? So I'm kind of looking for the foods first that have fiber, our whole grains, and then looking at where are you putting them in throughout the day? How much are you getting? And so we don't necessarily have to start with weighing and measuring and all of that, because I would say a lot of us, we can use or benefit from more, where a lot of us just aren't getting enough. I would tend to prioritize for our age group, our vegetables. Of all of the fiber rich foods, I would prioritize, vegetables. And so then we have the opportunity to make a list, like, Jill, let's do a brain dump. Let's just, it might be like a 5th grade exercise. Like, let's just write down all of the, veggies that you like. And with prompting and exploration, maybe trying out some cooking methods that you haven't tried. Like, have you tried roasted Brussels sprouts?
Talk about delicious. Yeah.
I know. We get to build that list because I think some of us, we just get in a mode. We forget about all of the veg out there.
Yeah, it is easy to get in ruts.
Yeah. And so, if we can kind of get a feel there in the first week or two together, what's going on. And then we work with food preferences, maybe trying out some different cooking methods or looking at what nutrients are you missing, and then fill it in with XYZ food that is providing that in addition to the fiber.
Fasting. Yes or no?
A black and white. Yes or no? Maybe.
Well, just give us your opinion. It doesn't have to be yes or no. Maybe is okay too.
The third option. Conditional. Again, I think we have to really understand where we're at in our life cycle. What are we looking for? What are our expectations? So if it's strictly weight loss, for example, fat loss, and there's nothing else going on, that is very reductionist right there, because what if you are experiencing a high level of stress in your life and you still want fat loss, right? But adding on a stressor of fasting, potential stressor, I should say, could be, maybe counter to what our fat loss goals are, or just be a very slow process. And then if we are an active woman, we still need to consider, are we needing to fuel some of those sessions? Do we need to move that in an eating window? So I tend to be, tell me tell me more about you before I can say whether or not we want to put in some longer fasting windows or try a period of time with some, longer fasting windows or shorter eating windows.
So truly you are not opposed to it. It just matters or depends on what your goals are and what you're actually doing.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have seen benefit with working on those longer fasting windows, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that outright for every woman over 50. So again, looking at life stress, what kind of training or exercise we do, what is our health status right now, what are our habits and routines, family dynamics, all of those things, instead of just saying, you know what, you only get an 8-hour eating window. I think that is a disservice to the individual.
Right.
Okay, that's fair.
In the introduction, we talked a little bit about that you help people with a metabolic condition. So can you explain metabolic flexibility or efficiency to us? What does that mean?
Oh, yeah, that's great. So metabolic efficiency, by, the working definition that I will give here is metabolic efficiency is where the body uses its fuel sources, its endogenous fuel sources more efficiently, meaning all of us have thousands and thousands of calories of fat stored that we can mobilize as an energy source, in contrast to carbohydrate, which is a very limited energy source in the body. So the efficiency aspect is what metabolic fuel can I use efficiently that happens to be fat, predominantly. How do I teach the body to do that? We use a combination of dietary and exercise interventions to maximize efficiency. Nothing needs to be extreme, but that efficiency piece can be measured in a lab setting. I mean, we have some other kinds of tests that we can do to get a sense of your level of metabolic efficiency. The flexibility piece is more conditional, meaning if I'm going to go sprint, do 100-meter sprints, am I good at then switching to using that fast burning fuel or that faster accessed fuel, which is carbohydrate, to do the work that I'm trying to do? Whereas if I was just going to go hike leisure for a few hours or doing a slow, easy run, I don't necessarily want to be burning all of my carbohydrate because it's a lower intensity exercise. Fat would be a better fuel source to use more of to support that exercise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about using fat rather than carbs, fat adapted for an endurance athlete. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what fat adapted means.
Yeah, I would say in that context, the more metabolically efficient you are, likely the more fat adapted you are. So if I were to test you with a metabolic cart and, find out what your exercise intensities are, like your low to moderate intensities, I would see of the calories that you're burning, a larger proportion is coming from your fat stores to generate that ATP versus carbohydrate. So fat adapted means you're mobilizing from your internal fat stores that energy source or creating that energy source from your stored fat more efficiently than tapping into glycogen or any kind of supplemental carbohydrate you'd use.
Are you saying that how we eat affects that, our ability to tap into the fat?
Yes. I would say the food and the style, the pattern of nutrition highly influences fat adaptation or the level therein, more so than exercise. That is debated probably now for quite some time. Like right. Exercise has the bigger role. Certainly more elite, professional athletes have a high level of fat utilization. They're very good at fat burning.
Yeah.
But for
the rest of us.
Yeah, definitely. Exercise plays a role, but we eat, 3-5 times a day. That has this huge influence on our ability to teach the body to burn more fat. it doesn't always equate to being ripped or like shedding 20 pounds of fat immediately or anything like that. It's more a metabolic fuel use.
I'm going to guess like this is where like if you're eating a lot of simple carbs and white bread and all that, that you're not going to be very metabolically efficient. But
correct.
Okay, so this is where we would want the protein, the fiber, and maybe some fat in there. But
you got it. Yeah, that combination.
So like sticking with complex carbs over simple carbs.
Yeah, ultimately it's like, how are we balancing our blood sugar? That has a big influence on the ability to become better fat adapted. And so when we think of balancing blood sugar, we've got to have protein in that meal. We've got to have fiber rich or, colorful type plant foods. I would say the fiber comes to, my mind here, fiber, which often ties to that complex carbohydrate or just non-starchy carbohydrate as well. And then, a little bit of fat in there if it's not already in the protein source. And all of that typically makes for a really good, stable blood sugar curve. If we want to test with, a glucometer or get a continuous glucose monitor to see our own responses to food, that's another option. But over time, doing that practice with our foods helps with that level of fat adaptation.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Well, and it often ties to metabolic disease, and so if we look at diabetes or cardiovascular disease, oftentimes, there's that association or lack thereof. Like, oh, wow, well, if we can work to better stabilize blood sugar through food, now we have less risk for diabetes or our blood sugar control is much better.
Right.
Yeah, which is so important for our age group.
Right.
I gather very easy to start having those high spikes in glucose levels and which
A1C, right?
Yes.
Let's throw in hydration. What do you recommend? And should we just be drinking lots of water or should we be using supplements, electrolytes, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for all of us to do a little check on. It sounds nerdy to do a log just of your hydration, but I often find, we either forget or as we age, our thirst sensation changes, that desire or that intuitive or innate sense of thirst becomes suppressed. And so, we can go the first half of the day with just a cup of coffee or whatever. And then, mid-afternoon, it's like, oh, Ma, I haven't had any water or any fluid whatsoever. So I think that's important for all of us to take a look at with wherever you're at age-wise or activity level. I mean, I don't go so far as to say every drop of liquid we drink should have electrolyte in it. I think, a mix of fluids is good, but certainly the more active we are, if we're doing some sweaty stuff or we're, live in a climate that does, predispose itself to higher humidity or warmer temperatures, certainly we can benefit from electrolytes, but we've got to look at sodium as the primary electrolyte and, how much salt are you getting in your food versus, your fluids? So I think the hydration piece, let's just look at the daily first and then bring in the electrolytes and so forth. I'm not a huge fan of the classic sports drink for our group or anything for our age set here. But there's definitely a time and a place for that in endurance sport or other sweaty exercise that we're doing. Yeah.
Right. So if we're not really doing a whole lot, we might just be good with water and just making sure we're getting enough sodium. And if we're really running hard or working out hard, make sure we're maybe needing to add more electrolyte.
Yeah. Although, now that you say that, Jill, I think too, when we've got a little something in our water, it might help us drink a little more. So I do see cases let's go ahead and get a low sugar or zero sugar electrolyte powder or add the pinch of salt or whatever to our bottle. And if that kicks up our thirst response or helps us drink more, then that's favorable. So that can be another approach if we're struggling. I know some women like, I hate water. Like, okay, let's figure out how to make it more palatable.
Well, I noticed on your website, you have a variety of testing, and I'm wondering what testing women over 50 should consider getting. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like some blood work. We often get blood work with an annual physical, but sometimes it is very high level blood work.
Right.
Our complete blood count. And I would say the blood work, if we're suffering, having a hard time with energy levels, what are your complaints? I might start with the blood work because we could see, for example, B12 levels can tend to decrease over time with aging. That can tie to energy levels, or if we're eating an animal protein restricted diet. Some of these nutrients can be shown here in our blood work as our red flags, or geez, we're getting in the low zone there. That can be a very affordable way to start to then enhance the nutrition pattern and fix some of those complaints. So that would be a good one that I would recommend, and we can tailor the set of blood biomarkers based on the individual.
You mentioned earlier about the genetic testing, the whatever.
Yeah, nutrigenetic.
Nutrigenetic, yes.
Yep.
How accurate are those now, or the correlation with what kind of foods to eat, and what's your thoughts on those?
I would say any of the home, the kits that you order for home, I would steer clear of those that are direct to consumer, meaning I won't name names, but so many of these companies that just sell you a kit, there's no practitioner involved. Those are now, I would
$20 thing on Groupon isn't the way to go.
Exactly. I would steer clear of those. So there are just a handful of companies in the whole world who use from the evidence, pull, in a very rigorous manner, pull these genes from the evidence and do what's called a polygenic interpretation. So they're looking, at how do all of these genes that we're testing for, how do they play together in nutrient related pathways or metabolic pathways or cellular pathways. So I definitely align with one of those better companies. And I'm not trying to do any sales pitch, but it is more a caution for people interested. This is a very different test even than like the 23andMe, which is looking at traits. So the nutrigenetic, it's kind of like some of the gut tests out there where you order the kit and then it sends you a report with a bunch of red, yellow, green, and you're like, I don't even know what this means.
That's out a lot of numbers, but then what do you do?
I know.
Right?
So unfortunately, the testing world is very confusing, and we can waste a lot of money, which is very upsetting. So I would say to connect with someone, a practitioner who can really show you the difference and talk to you about it before you're spending a whole bunch of money on these tests.
That's I had one of those done, but it's been probably 7 or 8 years. I'll bet you the information has changed a lot. I should see if they do updates.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Because I did spend a fair amount of money on it. It was through a doctor. I mean, Was
it? Okay.
Yeah, the science has advanced.
I'm sure people have been doing research over past 7 years on this, that they probably could give me more up-to-date info.
Was it a gene test?
Yeah, it was nutrigenomics through.
Okay.
It was at the Cleveland Clinic.
Okay. Yep. Certainly. Yeah. With the research, especially in the world of genes, the genome and learning all the gene variants that we have. Gosh, that is such an emerging area. It's very exciting.
It's really exploding, the information.
But that's good to know that, because I see those advertised, truly the $20 Groupon. So if you're going to spend your time doing it, find a professional who can actually help you find a good test and help you interpret the results.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
You can get the test, but if you don't know what to do after the test, what good is it really, right?
Well, yeah. And and even with the gene testing, that company may look at one gene And that's not how our bodies work with one gene. There are many genes that affect our uptake of B12, vitamin B12, for example, or folate. And so if you're looking at one gene like MTHFR, that is not the way we want to do this. That's just not how the body works. And so unfortunately, that's what's happened in the practitioner world. So even me saying, find a good practitioner, there's still a difference in the testing methodology that ultimately is what we want to look at.
Yeah, that's still a hurdle, isn't it? Right. And what about supplements? I know it's hard to just say one size fits all, but with women over 50 in general, does it seem like there's certain supplements that would be your first go-tos for women over 50 that, generally women are low in? You've mentioned B12 a couple times. For myself, we live in Northeast Ohio. I definitely am taking D3 because we have a lot of cloud cover here.
Yeah, vitamin D3 would be a good one. I mean, it's nice to see what your level is through periodic blood testing so we know how to dose it.
Right.
And again, there are gene variants that affect vitamin D. So there you go. The monitoring is important. I would say that would be in the top, maybe top 5, top 10 of supplements. The others might be some omega-3, depending on your intake based on, inflammation, or I'm sure you guys have talked about inflammaging, it's just some of that inflammation that occurs as we go through the aging process, perimenopause into post-menopause years. Creatine, have you delved into that much?
We haven't really talked about that much.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, creatine is another one that's taking more precedence or front stage in our, age group 50 and older women, because we're finding out much more about the impacts, not just on preserving lean muscle or potentially being able to build some lean muscle, but also positive effects on brain health and gut health.
Oh.
And so this is one, it's a very benign, mellow supplement. You don't notice, it's kind of like your D3. It's nothing,
okay. So it's not something you need to be concerned about, like, oh, should I take this or not?
It's pretty safe.
Good to know.
Very safe. And it's been around for a long time. Now we're just appreciating the role for our, 50 and older women. And the dose could be minimal, maybe half teaspoon per day. It's a powder, you can mix it in your shake or your yogurt or your just, water and down it. But for any women who are vegan, I would highly recommend taking creatine because your stores of creatine are going to be significantly lower. And women have lower stores of creatine than men. Nonetheless, this would be one of those emerging supplements that I think women should consider bringing into the mix. Okay,
that's good to know. And we have not talked about that much, so I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, that might be a good one to have a whole show on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, so what about the different like ketone supplements? I see people with these ketone salts or ketone esters. What's your thought? So those I gather help people be in ketosis or to be, and is that something we want? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Oh, this is great because it's actually a newer area I've been delving into over the last few months myself. There is a big difference between the ketone esters that we can find in a supplement versus these salts. But to answer your question, like, should we be taking ketone products? You know what? We don't have a lot of research in the 50 and older woman group to say it helps with specifically like our post-menopause years or peri. There's nothing there yet, but there is indication in the male and female group. I think the age range tested went up to 65, that ketone esters. So this would be a supplement you take if you get your blood level of ketones high enough that you will feel more clear brain-wise, cognition-wise, focus-wise. You may feel more energetic. it's another fuel source for the brain, essentially.
Okay. That sounds appealing.
It does.
Yeah,
It
sure
does. I would recommend the ketone esters, which is really hard to find. I only know of one company doing a good job there. But yeah, you have to look for the ketone ester. I don't know if you want me to name the brand, but
I don't have a problem with you naming it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Delta G company is the one I would recommend. The thing is, it's an investment financially. So I would recommend, Jill and Chris, let's first optimize everything we can with your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep and stress. And then maybe we add that on. But I mean, if we're looking to just get some quote unquote hacks going, I mean, and you've got the cash, I suppose we could go there to the ketone esters.
But what you're saying is there are things you could do lifestyle wise or diet wise before you can't bypass all of that by just saying, hey, I'm going to go buy some ketone esters. And
I don't see that work very well for 99% of the people.
It's
okay.
a tweak after all the other
way.
things have been done.
I know.
Okay.
Plus,
it's just so, if someone ever said, I have this pill and it's going to, you don't have to do anything else but take this pill and you'll live a long, healthy life, we'd all be lining up for it.
I know. You won't be alone.
No.
Well, I'm not sure we've ever asked this of a guest before, but can you tell us what we could expect when we work with a nutritionist? I mean, how do you get started with clients and how do you help them in the long term?
This sounds corny to say. I'm here to serve, but ultimately I'm here to help the individual make better, feel better, manage or prevent disease, so I whatever it is you're looking for, and I'm not saying I can do it all, I'm not a miracle worker, but certainly in my areas of expertise, if you are looking to, let's say, just feel better energy, you're not sure if your nutrition is optimized to support that. And oftentimes it isn't. I will work with you again on timing of nutrition, composition. Maybe there is an introduction of some new foods to support that. Of course, we've got to work on, your willingness and your habits and all that other good stuff to make it happen. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of us have body composition on the mind. We forget about all the other good stuff that we could work on, how I feel, and maybe the body composition happens as a side effect.
Right.
Or if you're not sleeping well, could that be food related? Absolutely. If you're having, the sleepies at 3 p.m., is that food related? Maybe, and probably, so all of those things, I think for all of us thinking what is bugging you, or what are you not able to do as well as you want to do? Have you worked with a dietitian? If you've never had a single assessment in your 50s or beyond, I think it's a great time. It's kind of like going to get a massage in a way, right? It's a treat, but you also get some objective information that now you can employ some strategies to support whatever the things are that you're wanting to make better.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right.
I don't know that I've ever thought of it as it's the same thing as going to get a massage. But I mean, as a way to treat yourself, or just basic self-care.
Self-care. I love it. I think a lot of people are afraid of, nutrition professionals. We're just going to make you eat broccoli all the time or something,
Right.
I
don't want to eat kale.
I know. But I mean, if you find the right dietitian, I think they work with you and they're not pushing anything that isn't right for you. It's to work with you and support you.
Any advice on finding the dietitian?
Yes, I would say that is an important piece first, because a lot of people don't know that a nutritionist may not be a dietitian, right?
Right. I know there's a difference.
Yeah. So I would really, to find a registered dietitian, you can go to eatright.org, which is our credentialing organization for dietitians. There's a registry there, and you can search in your area for a local dietitian, or you can, a lot of us are all virtual now, like myself. Right. Work with people all over the country and world. So, I mean, your Google search, just make sure this is a pitch for the dietitians out there, that they have the RD or RDN credential. And then that's at least getting you started, someone who's had the professional training, the advanced education. It's not just a 2-day certification that they're working from.
Right. So for you have the RDN, but you also focus on athletes. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I were looking for a person, I would try to figure out what kind of dietitian person I want, because your interests would sort of lead you to be a good choice for someone who wants to be an endurance athlete, for example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with my other piece here being the master's athlete, meaning
right.
like 35, 40 and older, but also overlaying like, well, us women, we've got a lot of different needs. So, I mean, if you're active, you kind of fall into my group here. But yeah, I mean, if you're just looking for like a specific area, cancer prevention or something, I might not be the best person for that, certainly, but there are all kinds of specialists out there with the dietitians. Yeah.
All right. That's great. That's good to know. The other thing about, you have a blog on your website that has tons of recipes and food suggestions. There were some really interesting things on there. Is there a particular recipe you like to use when it's been a long day and you need to fix something quickly?
Oh, I don't know that I have any on my blog for that, because I'm such a breakfasty person. Like my blogs often are on breakfast or like a workout.
Right. Well, what do you do? It might be rather than what's on your blog.
What's your go-to recipe when, it's been a long day?
You come home and you say, I got to eat.
I'll tell you. Yes. So I'm the one pot wonder woman. I find the protein, which might be chicken, shrimp, or tempeh. I like, those as my primary, or some ground turkey or something. But I'm the one pot wonder. So I'll saute a bunch of vegetables, like everything but the kitchen sink kind of thing, and add some garlic, maybe some ginger, and then, cook the protein separately, but then just throw it all in and make a big pot like that. That is such, for me, a 20, 25 minute thing. And I don't know, I'm not a savvy, culinary expert or anything. I just like the easy for those long days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Easy, long days. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's exactly what I was looking for. But I will tell our listeners that you have a lot of good recipes and food things on your website, on the blog.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, if there was one message that you wanted to leave our listeners with, if there's something that you say to basically all your clients or what have you, what would that be?
I would say that it is never too late to make a shift towards better. So if you do have something that's not feeling right, whether that's mentally, physically, or, even spiritually, right there, it's never too late to step forward and, reach out for some help and to take advantage. There's so much opportunity. So I would just encourage everyone to think about that if they're feeling stuck.
That's great. That's good. And remind us about your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
Oh, thank you. Inside Sports Nutrition. And so it's me and a colleague of mine, Bob Siebehart, and we talk about a whole bunch of sport nutrition topics and have different athletes and researchers and different kinds of guests on.
Oh, great. And I assume we find that wherever we find our podcasts.
Yes. Yep.
And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And if our listeners would like to follow you, where do you suggest they go online?
I would say Instagram is probably the better spot. Nutrition Mechanic is my handle there. And then website, nutritionmechanic.com. I mean, I'm on the Twitter and Facebook. I'm just, how you go in bouts.
Yeah, I do.
Like,
I understand that completely.
Yeah.
Well, it has been just great talking with you today, Dina. So Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate this so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for being our guest. It was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you as well. What a treat.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
I've never thought of just making an appointment with a dietitian to discuss my eating habits. I love the idea of equating that to making an appointment for a massage. I don't know why I found that to be such a startling idea.
Yeah. I was kind of hit the same way with it. The other thing that I keep coming back to after talking with her is when she talked about the more you stabilize your blood sugar curve, the more you stabilize or the more the fat stores become available. I just found that an interesting concept because I never really thought about the two together and how, that works. But I guess that makes a lot of sense. But, stabilizing the blood sugar curve, I guess, is a really good goal to have.
She mentioned about people using the continuous glucose monitors or even just checking your own blood sugar. But I don't know that if you want to do that or not.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm ready to invest in one, but
yeah, right. Well, certainly not the continuous ones. They're expensive.
Oh, no.
But it was interesting that eating protein and fiber is so good for our metabolism and glucose levels and all of that.
Right.
We're always talking about protein, so it's good to think about fiber too. We don't tend to talk much about that.
Well, we do talk about the veggie challenge, and to me, that's fiber. Vegetables and then the beans added into like a vegetable salad or added into the veggies. Eating the protein first in a meal, I've heard that's something to think about. And it'd be interesting to really test your blood while you're in the middle of doing, all the different eating things. But I guess you could get kind of over.
So I thought her opinion on some of that was a good one. Like there's so many things that you can take care of first before you start worrying about supplements or doing lots of testing and things. Just if you get the basics down,
right.
Then after that, if you want, you can pursue some of those other things.
I thought it was interesting too. She said, "How fast do you eat?" And I don't know if you could hear me laugh at that point, but I tend to eat way too fast and I probably go too long between meals and get too hungry. You know what I mean?
You're hungry and then you wolf it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that if I go really too long, I make bad choices.
Oh, but definitely.
You can get busy doing all the different things, your obligations and out of town and different things happen. If I don't really plan the day out, plan the week out with the groceries, do the food prep and all that other stuff, it can start to come back.
Right. I thought she really had a lot of great information and it was interesting. Her focus being on women, master athlete.
Yes.
Women, which puts her into the perimenopause and post-menopause and endurance athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, because it definitely is different. And I'd love to hear what our listeners think. Do you have any questions or thoughts about what she had to say? I'd love to hear from you.
And if you have something, a question or a comment, you could reach us at our website, becomingellie.com, or on any of our social media accounts. We're Becoming Ellie at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
Also, be sure to join our private Facebook group where we encourage and support each other.
It was great talking with you today, Chris. I'm looking forward to our next episode of the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast.
I am too. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.